The mutilated body of a young man is found in the middle of the road in a wealthy Boston suburb. No identity, no clues, and no idea what happened. But as the story comes together, the truth will shock you. For today's story, I'll tell you about the strange death of Delvonte Tisdale. His death shocked his family and communities over 900 miles apart. But how was it that this young man was found dead so far from home? So come with me, and I'll tell you what happened as I take you to where it happened. The story begins on the night of November 15th, 2010, in the town of Milton, an extremely wealthy suburb just south of Boston. A man driving home around 9:30 p.m. is flagged down by a group of college girls who are out of their car, parked on the side of the road. He most likely expected that the girls were lost, so I can only imagine his surprise when they told him they think there's a dead body in the road. When the man got out to check, he could not be sure what he was seeing. Although he recognized some features as possibly human and a pair of jeans, the amount of damage made him question what he was looking at. He called the police anyways, just in case. The police arrived and quickly confirmed that what the girls and the man had found was in fact the body of a human. At a press conference later that night, the police would describe the body as, quote, significantly mutilated. They were able to determine that it was the body of a black male with a muscular build, but not much else. The only clothing on the body was a pair of shredded jeans and a green belt. Police described the body as having major trauma, with the head being so damaged that they doubted a relative or anyone else would be able to identify the body. The police observed what they believed to be road rash on the torso, which led to the suspicion that the person was hit by a vehicle and dragged. If this was true though, then that means that the victim was hit and dragged by a car somewhere else and then picked up and dumped at this location. Because although there was a significant amount of blood and other debris at the scene, the evidence so far did not appear that he was struck where he was found. The police began their investigation with what little they had. They interviewed both the man and the girls that found the body and started canvassing the neighborhood for information. When the man was interviewed, he told the story of how he was flagged down by the girls and called 911 after seeing what he believed was the body. He lived on the street and there was nothing to make him seem suspicious to the police, so he was not detained. But when the girls were interviewed, the police had a different response. They told the police they took a wrong turn while heading from Curry College to the South Shore Mall. That story seemed possible, but unlikely. They were described as fidgety and evasive in their answers, and when asked why they didn't call 911 themselves, one of the girls said that she dialed it but didn't hit send on her phone, which also seemed unlikely. Soon after, witness statements would put the girls' entire story into question. A group of men were working on a car at a home near where the body was found. They said not long after 9 p.m., they heard a loud bang, which made them think that maybe the engine had fallen from the car. But they checked on the car and nothing was wrong, so they went about their business. Police believed that the bang may have been a gunshot, meaning that the victim was shot at the scene and then possibly dumped out of a vehicle. Police were also lucky enough to find a neighbor with security cameras, and working off the timeline between the 911 call and when the neighbors reported the bang, they began to view the tapes. They saw the girl's Jeep SUV come into the neighborhood. Not long after, they saw the Jeep leave the neighborhood. Then the Jeep came back, but this time it had another vehicle with it. It was a white Audi, and it was obvious the two vehicles were traveling together as they pulled over and turned around at the same time. They were seen on the videotapes coming back and forth 2 or 3 more times additionally. When confronted with this information, the girls changed their story, and at least one of them stated that they came to the neighborhood to smoke pot before going out to a party for the night. When asked about the other vehicle, they said it was one of their friends who got nervous upon seeing the body and didn't want to stick around. But even this change in the story still did not line up with what they saw on the tapes. Could these girls possibly be involved in this horrific scene? The police hoped not, but they knew they had to locate this white Audi if they were to get answers to any of these questions. So they put a description out through the press and then began to search for the car. Detectives located the white Audi in the Dorchester neighborhood of Boston, and when they looked at the wheels and the wheel wells, they observed obvious blood and brain matter. As they began to process and tow the vehicle, the police were notified that the driver and her lawyer had contacted them and wanted to talk. I'll pause the story for a few moments as we arrive at the scene where the body was found. As you can see, this neighborhood is set back and not easy to get to from the main road, so the likelihood of these girls coming here by accident was slim to none. They obviously knew where they were going in order to get here. Briarbrook Street is coming up straight ahead, which is where the 911 call came in for the body, which was located just in this intersection here. So we'll take a look around the intersection so you can get a feel for just how this neighborhood is and how shocking something like this would be in an area like this. Although it was hard to determine exactly where the body was, judging by some of the few pictures that were available, I believe it was over here on this side of the road, just against the grass, between the driveway and the white car. Now that you've seen the location where this all started, we'll get back to the investigation and the interview with the driver of the white Audi. The girl with the white Audi talked freely with police and answered all of their questions. She said that the spot at the end of Briarbrook Street was where they would go to smoke pot because it was isolated and there was little chance of running into the police. She went on to tell them that although she had not gone initially with the girls in the Jeep that night, they did call her later and asked her if she wanted to see a dead body. Whether out of doubt or some type of morbid curiosity, she agreed to come. The girls in the Jeep drove out to meet her on the main road, which is why they were seen on the security camera driving back and forth more than once. When they got back to Briarbrook Street, the girls got out of the car and went to look. They had apparently decided they were going to call the police, but they were nervous because of the drugs, and the girl with the Audi said she was not sure if her car was registered properly or insured, so she decided to leave before the police came. Not long after she left is when the man came that the other girls flagged down, and he was the one that finally called 911. The girl's story checked out, and while she was being interviewed, technicians were going over her car, and although blood and brain matter were found on the tires, it was determined that her vehicle did not strike the body. It was more than likely that the blood and brain matter got on the tires just by her driving down the street. Although the girls were cleared of any involvement in this death, I would hardly call their actions upon discovering the body innocent. And now, the only leads that the police had led to a dead end. One detective on scene was quoted as saying, "How did he get here? It's not like he fell out of the sky." But other detectives weren't so sure. They said it was a real possibility that this body could have fallen from an airplane. They decided to trace the approach path to Logan Airport in Boston, and it went right over the area where the body was found. When they continued the approach path backwards, it went right over the Blue Hills, which is where the search would go to next, and where we'll drive to now to look at where they recovered the next evidence in this case. As I'll show you when we get there, the terrain in the Blue Hills is very difficult to navigate, and the police organized a massive search to cover the area to look for evidence. But what they recovered there would make the entire process worth it. Scattered throughout the area, under where the same plane would have passed, the police located a t-shirt and a pair of shoes that appeared to have belonged to the victim. This evidence, along with the massive injuries to the victim, all but confirmed the theory that the body had fallen from an airplane. The police released this information to the public, and it became a national story almost instantly. 2 lucky breaks also came for the investigators. One would be a phone call out of North Carolina from someone who believed she saw a man fitting the description of the victim walking near the airport in the days before. The other would be a piece of paper that the medical examiner found in the pocket of the jeans. The paper had handwriting on it and appeared to be some type of hall pass. It was written in cursive and the name was illegible, but it was possible if they had an identity, they could match it to it. Investigators went to North Carolina, and not long after, they located a missing person report for a Delvonte Tisdale. He fit the description of the victim, and the name Tisdale appeared to be the name on the hall pass. Since facial recognition was out of the question, fingerprints confirmed the identification as that of the 16-year-old. Delvonte Tisdale lived with his father in North Carolina after previously living with his mother in Baltimore. He was by all accounts a good kid and a motivated student. Family and police were baffled at how he could have ended up falling from an airplane over 900 miles away. Further investigation revealed a handprint inside the wheel well of one of the airplanes that had flown from North Carolina to Logan Airport. Also, the grease that was found on the jeans on the body was determined to be the same grease used on landing gear in airplanes. Although the medical examiner was unable to determine an exact cause of death, it was unlikely that he was alive when he was dropped from the plane. He could have been crushed by the gear itself, he could have succumbed to the lack of oxygen or the freezing temperatures at flying altitude. I'll stop the story for a moment as we take a look in the Blue Hills where the police had to search for the evidence that determined he had fallen from an airplane. As you can see, it is difficult enough just to walk here, let alone conduct an investigation looking for evidence that had fallen thousands of feet from the sky. Although it is hard to be exact because of the few pictures available, this seems to be the exact spot where at least one of the pieces of evidence was collected, either one of the shoes or the t-shirt. I'll finish up our story as we make our way out of the Blue Hills. Police now knew who the body was and how he had gotten there, but they may never know why. There were reports that Delvonte was unhappy living at his father's house and may have been trying to make his way back to Baltimore to live with his mother. But this doesn't explain why an intelligent young man would make such a risky decision. He had apparently walked on foot to the airport and either damaged or found a damaged spot in a fence and was able to gain access to the tarmac and climb into the wheels of one of the planes. Delvonte's family sued the city of Charlotte and the airport for their negligence in failing to stop Delvonte from gaining access to the plane. Unfortunately, the case was thrown out in 2013 after a judge determined that the city and the airport were not liable. That'll do it for this week's story. Thank you for listening. I'm Holty. This was Holty Stories, and I'll see you next week.